Hello, YouTubers, and welcome to Level-Headed News. This is your host, Brenda. Got 16 articles for you here this morning. All the URLs are in the description of the video for your convenience. The first one here is off of Newsmax, and it says, Trump declares 9-day trip as a home run. President Donald Trump Saturday called his 9-day tour of the Middle East and Europe a home run, while affirming his commitment to increasing military spending and supporting the armed forces. Our travel took us to some of the holiest sites in the three Abrahamic religions and gathering of both America's oldest and newest friends, Trump said in a speech to members of the military at the Cignola Naval Air Station in Sicily. We traveled the world to strengthen long-standing alliances and to form new partnerships among nations devoted to the task of eradicating terrorism that plagues our planet. Trump and wife Melania are heading back to Washington after their travels to Saudi Arabia, Israel, Italy, and Belgium. After Trump received a royal welcome in Saudi Arabia, where he signed a multi-billion-dollar arms deal, he went on to the Vatican for a meeting with the Pope, then to Brussels for a NATO summit, finishing his trip in Sicily for a G7 meeting. On Saturday, he reaffirmed his vow to wipe out terrorism following the deadly attacks on Coptic Christians in Egypt. Together, civilized nations will crush the terrorists and block their funding and strip them of their territory and drive them out of this earth, said Trump. The nations of the Middle East have endured one terrorist attack after another. I call on them to take on the burden of fighting this evil that has killed so many innocent Muslims. He also spoke of the NATO summit, where he gave a speech on Thursday demanding the member states meet their financial commitments to defense spending. The U.S. is currently paying much more than any other nation, said Trump. That's not fair for the United States or for the United States taxpayers. We'll work on it. I will tell you a big difference over the last year. Money is actually starting to pour into NATO from countries that would not have been doing what they're doing now had I not been elected. I can tell you that. Trump said he also made great progress toward very, very vital goals at the G7. I laid out my vision for economic growth and fair trade and supportive of good paying jobs and even great paying middle class jobs and more, said Trump. I call for much greater security and cooperation on matters of terrorism and immigration to protect our citizens. Overall, he concluded, we made extraordinary gains on this historic trip. We paved the way for new air cooperations among the world to defeat the common enemy of terrorism. This is off of Newsmax.com. It says Mueller taps media liaison for Russia probe. Special counsel Robert Mueller has chosen Justice Department spokesman Peter Carr as his media liaison for the federal probes he's overseen to claims of collusion between Russia and members of President Donald Trump's 2016 presidential campaign, according to officials. Carr comes equipped with a resume of serving in similar roles in various areas of the government, Politico reported Friday. He has served the past 4 years as lead spokesman for the criminal division of the Justice Department. He was acting director of public affairs during the transition between the Trump administration and that of former President Barack Obama. He has also been spokesman for Senator Orrin Hatch, Republican of Utah, as well as U.S. Attorney's Office in Eastern District of Virginia, which has offices in Alexandria, Richmond, Norfolk, and Newport News. Mueller has begun working on the investigation and has set up an office in a building near D.C. Superior Court in Northwest Washington, according to Justice Department officials, although there were no details on how he would staff his office. The special counsel's office is up and running now. Assistant Attorney General for Administration Lee Loftus said at a Tuesday briefing. The next article, this is off of Zero Hedge. FBI refuses to hand over Comey memos to Congress. House Oversight Committee Chairman Jason Chavez said today that the FBI had decided to withhold documents, including memos, notes, summaries, and recordings requested by his committee in regards to the ongoing Russia probe. This was revealed in a letter sent by Chavez to the FBI, responding to the agency's decision to withhold documents requested by the committee on May the 16th of 2017. Denial to cooperate, as in a letter here that's presented in this article, and it's, Dear Mr. Chairman, this response is to your letter to Acting Director Andrew McCabe, dated May the 16th, 2017, concerning internal memoranda related to communications between former FBI Director James Comey and President Donald Trump. On May the 17th, 2017, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein announced the appointment of Director and Department of Justice official Robert S. Mueller III to serve as special counsel investigating Russian efforts to interfere with the 2016 United States presidential election. In light of this development and other considerations, we are undertaking appropriate consultation to ensure all relevant interests implicated requests are properly evaluated. We will update this response as soon as possible. Appreciate your continuing support of the FBI. Please do not hesitate to contact this office if we may provide additional assistance regarding this or any other matter. And it's signed by Gregory Bauer, Office of Congressional Affairs. According to a statement by the Oversight Committee, Chavez requests memos, notes, summaries, and recordings to assist the committee's investigation of the FBI's independence and which are outside the scope of the special counsel's investigation. Documents are due June the 8th of 2017, but may not happen as it appears the FBI is suddenly unwilling to cooperate. As Chavez elaborates, after a New York Times report, the former Federal Bureau of Investigation Director James Comey memorialized the content of a phone calls and meetings with President in a series of memoranda. He requested those memoranda and any related notes, summaries, and recordings. The FBI is withholding those documents, citing the appointment of Robert Mueller as special prosecutor. According to a letter from your staff, in light of this development and other consideration, the Bureau is undertaking appropriate consultation to ensure all relevant interests implicated by your request are properly evaluated. The letter states the committee has its own constitutionally based prerogative to conduct investigations, but the committee in no way wants to impede or interfere with the special counsel's ability to conduct its investigation. In fact, the committee's investigation will complement the work of the special counsel, whereas the special counsel is conducting a criminal or counterintelligence investigation that will occur largely behind closed doors. The committee's work will shed light on matters of high public interest, regardless of whether there is evidence of criminal conduct. The focus of the committee's investigation is the independence of the FBI, including conversations between President and Comey, and the process by which Comey was removed from his role as director. The records being withheld are central to those questions, even more so in light of Comey's decision not to testify before the committee at this time. I'm seeking to better understand Comey's communication with the White House and Attorney General in such a way that does not implicate the special counsel's work. As Chavez concludes, Congress and the American public have a right and a duty to examine this issue independently and the special counsel's investigation, or try this again, to examine this issue independently of the special counsel's investigation. I trust and hope you understand this and make the right decision to produce these documents to the committee immediately and on a voluntary basis. The American public is certainly looking forward to the FBI's release of the Comey memos, not only those to his meeting with Trump, but just as importantly with Loretta Lynch, as well as Barack Obama and or Hillary Clinton. The next article is off of Newsmax. And it says, McMaster not concerned following latest Kushner reports. President Donald Trump's top advisors are not concerned following reports that his son-in-law and top Russian diplomat may have discussed setting up a secret communication channel. In Sicily Saturday, advisor H.R. McMaster and Gary Cohen decided to commit on new revelations about Jared Kushner's communication with Russia ambassador to the U.S., Sergei Kislyak, but noted that the U.S. frequently sets up back channels to countries for discreet communications. McMaster said, "We have back channel communications with a number of countries." Chief Economic Advisor Gary Cohen, however, decided to answer questions about Kushner. "We're not going to comment on Jared," he said. Washington Post reported Friday that Kislyak told his superiors that he and Kushner discussed setting up back channel between Trump's transition team and the Kremlin. The White House in March confirmed that Kushner and Kislyak met at Trump's Tower in December for what one official called a brief courtesy meeting. The next article is off of BizPac Review. Waiting for the hamster. Here he is. Unsubstantiated Friday night report explodes. Jared Kushner tried to set up secret channel with Kremlin. Kushner's proposed setting up a secret, secure communication channel between the Kremlin and the Trump transition team, according to the Washington Post. Kushner, the president's son-in-law and senior advisor, floated the idea during a meeting with Russian ambassador to the U.S., Sergei Kislyak, at Trump Tower in early December. The Post reports citing U.S. officials who were briefed on intelligence gathering from intercepted Russian communications. The meeting was also attended by Michael Flynn, who served as White House National Security Advisor until he was forced to step down for failing to properly disclose contacts with Russian officials and discussions pertaining to sanctions. Superiors, Kushner proposed using Russian diplomatic facilities in the U.S. The officials briefed on the intelligence told Washington Post. Kislyak was reportedly surprised at the suggestion. The use of Russian communications equipment, he said Kushner proposed using, carried security risk for both Russia and the Trump transition team. Stressed that the information on Kushner's meeting is the result of intelligence collected from Russian officials, not surveillance of Kushner or any member of the Trump transition team. Russia at times information into communication streams it suspects are monitored as a way of sowing misinformation and confusion among U.S. analysts, the Washington Post acknowledged in its report on Friday. The meeting with Kislyak, which Kushner failed to disclose, was revealed in March. The Post was first alerted to the meeting and possibly of secret communication channel in mid-December by an anonymous letter. The Washington Post reported Thursday that investigators are looking into several meetings between Kushner and foreign officials as part of a broader investigation into Russian meddling in the 2016 presidential election. Mr. Kushner previously volunteered to share with Congress what he knows about these meetings. Jamie Gorelick, one of Kushner's attorneys, told the Post. He will do the same if he is contacted in connection with any other inquiry. Next article is off of Breitbart. Flashback. Reports Obama campaign opened back channel to Iran. Amid reports that President Trump's son-in-law and senior advisor Jared Kushner allegedly talked with Russia's envoy to the U.S. about setting up a back channel for communications, it may be instructive to recall that representatives for Barack Obama in 2008 presidential campaign reportedly established a back channel with Iran. The Washington Post, which broke the story about Kushner, cited communications with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak to Moscow, allegedly intercepted by U.S. intelligence officials. Russian diplomats are known to deliberately place misinformation in communications that they believe to be monitored, the Post noted, allowing for the possibility that Kushner never actually asked for a back channel. ABC News quoted two sources as saying the purported back channel that Kushner and Kislyak were allegedly discussing was supposed to focus on policy issues, including the war in Syria, where Russia is highly influential. In August of 2014, Michael Ledeen, a former consultant to the National Security Council and U.S. Defense Department, penned a column at PJ Media stating Obama opened a back channel to Iran during the 2008 presidential campaign. Ledeen said the back channel went through retired Ambassador William G. Miller, who also led the 1979 negotiating mission during the Iran hostage crisis. Ledeen wrote that Miller confirmed his back channel involvement to him. Ledeen wrote, and there is emphasis added by the reporter here, it says the actual strategy is Dente first, and then a full alliance with Iran throughout the Middle East and North Africa. It has been on display since before the beginning of the Obama administration. During his first presidential campaign in 2008, Mr. Obama used a secret back channel to Tehran that the mullahs that he was a friend of the Islamic Republic and that they would be very happy with his policies. The secret channel was Ambassador William G. Miller, who served in Iran during the Shah's rule as chief of staff for the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence and the ambassador to the Ukraine. Ambassador Miller has confirmed to me his conversations with Iran leaders during the 2008 campaign. The next article is off of BizPac Review. It says, rise from your knees. Poland's prime minister destroys EU. We won't be blackmailed into taking your migrants. Polish Prime Minister Beata Szydło said Poland will not be blackmailed into accepting thousands of refugees under the EU quota system, especially after the Manchester suicide bombing that killed 22 people, including 2 Poles. Says Dole slammed weak-willed EU leaders for allowing the slow death of European culture and its people by taking in millions of refugees that are destroying the Western nations financially, socially, and culturally. In a defiant speech before the Polish parliament on Wednesday, Szydło urged lawmakers to protect Poland and its children from the scourges of Islamist terrorism and cultural suicide. Where are you headed, Europe? Rise from your knees and from your lethargy, or you will be crying over your children every day. If you cannot see that terrorism has the potential to hurt every country in Europe, and you think that Poland should not defend itself, you are going hand in hand with those who point this weapon against Europe, against all of us. Do we politicians, or try this again, do we want politicians who say we have to get used to terrorist attacks? Prime Minister Beata Szydło received raucous applause from many members of the Polish parliament who expressed their approval of her no-nonsense call to action. Szydło's government is currently battling the Brussels-based European Union over taking in a quota of refugees, mostly from Muslim nations, in the Middle East and North Africa after her predecessor in 2015 agreed to take 4,500 to 5,000 migrants. The EU then raised excuse me, the EU then raised that quota to 6,200, but Sisto's administration has refused, saying it will instead provide financial aid to refugee camps in the Middle East. Neighboring Hungary has taken a similar stance against the forced refugee quotas. European Union has since threatened sanctions against Poland if it doesn't accept the refugees by June, Radio Poland reported, but Prime Minister Sisto of Poland will not be blackmailed. It's unclear what the sanctions would be, but Sisto said she'd prefer any sanctions over taking in hordes of refugees, especially if they refuse to assimilate or pose a terrorist threat. This needs to be said clearly and directly. This is an attack on Europe, on our culture, and on our traditions, she said. Since Europe began taking in millions of refugees, mostly Muslim from Arab nations, during the past 20 years, some parts of Western countries have started to resemble the Middle East. Meanwhile, the wealthy Arab nations of the Persian Gulf, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Bahrain, Iraq, Oman, and Qatar have done little to help their Muslim brethren. The next article, this is off of Refugee Settlement Watch.com. It says, stunning news. Trump's State Department opens the floodgates. Refugee admissions will explode in coming weeks. Betraying the voters who elected Donald Trump, the Department of State slipped the news of contractors on Thursday, who then slipped the news to the New York Times just as you were packing up for the beach or getting ready for a family barbecue, using the federal government's favorite holiday weekend trick to bury the news. Forget everything I said in my post yesterday about Trump's average admissions. If they do as they are now saying they will, Donald Trump will be responsible for one of 6 highest resettlement years since 9/11. Manchester, here we come. Here's the headline, Pat tip to Julia. Emphasis, mine. It says, U.S. quietly lifts limit of number of refugees allowed in. Despite repeated efforts by President Trump to curtail refugee resettlements, the State Department this week quietly lifted the department's restriction on the number of refugees allowed to enter the United States. The result could be near doubling of refugees entering the country from about 830 people a week in the first 3 weeks of this month to well over 1,500 people per week by next month, according to refugee advocates. Tens of thousands of refugees are waiting to come to the United States. The State Department decision was conveyed in an email on Thursday to private agencies in countries around the world that help refugees manage the nearly 2-year application process needed to enter the United States. In her email, Jennifer L. Smith, a department official, wrote that the refugee groups could begin bringing people to the United States unconstrained by the weekly quotas that were in place. Refugee groups now predict that entries into the United States could increase so rapidly that the total number of refugees admitted by September the 30th, the end of the fiscal year, could exceed 70,000. Refugee advocates were delighted by the State Department's decision. This is long overdue, but we're very happy, said Mark Hatfield, president and chief executive of HIAS, an immigrant aid society. And then they have a link. It says, continue reading here as the contractors say they are worried for next year. Oh, sure they are. Bottom line is that it appears that the Republican Congress never forgot they want to keep big business donors happy by providing a steady supply of cheap labor, appropriated gobs of money for refugee resettlement. And the Trump administration, remember, Trump campaigned with talk of a moratorium on refugee resettlement, appears to have no fight left in them on this issue, other issues too. And there's a link. It says, here are the refugee admissions since 9/11. Those in red exceed Trump's projected 70,000. Bush had only 2 years in excess of 70,000, and Obama had 3 of his 8 years higher than 70,000. And it gives a whole list of them here if you want to pull that up and take a look at it. Disgraceful. The next article is off of Breitbart.com. It says, report Trump administration to nearly double rate of refugee admissions for balance of fiscal year 2017. The New York Times is reporting that State Department will nearly double the rate of refugee admissions to the United States for the balance of fiscal year 2017 from the current rate of 830 a week to 1,500 a week. Efforts by President Trump to curtail refugee resettlements, the State Department this week quietly lifted the department's restriction on the number of refugees allowed to enter the United States, the Times reported on Friday. The result could be near doubling of refugees entering the country from about 830 people a week in the first 3 weeks of this month to well over 1,500 people per week by next month, according to refugee advocates. Tens of thousands of refugees are waiting to come to the United States. The State Department's decision was conveyed in an email on Thursday to private agencies in countries around the world that help refugees manage the nearly 2-year application process needed to enter the United States. In her email, Jennifer L. Smith, a department official, wrote that the refugee groups could begin bringing people to the United States unconstrained by weekly quotas that were in place. It is unclear if the State Department made this upward adjustment with the knowledge and approval of President Trump. The Department of Justice, however, was apparently consulted. A State Department spokeswoman, speaking on the condition of anonymity because she was not authorized to discuss the issue publicly, said the department had consulted the Department of Justice about its refugee quotas and had decided to adjust them, the Times reported. As of May 24th, 45,533 refugees have been admitted to the United States in fiscal year 2017, which began on October the 1st of 2016. Earlier this week, Breitbart News estimated that the refugee entry rate continued at the level of 817 per week, the rate of the 4 most recent weeks. The total number of refugees admitted to the United States in fiscal year 2017 by September the 30th would be 60,672. If the rate of refugee admission continues at 1,500 a week level reported by the Times for the remaining 18 weeks of fiscal year 2017, the total number of refugees admitted in the United States during fiscal year 2017 will be 72,996. In fiscal year 2016, the last full year of the Obama administration, 84,995 refugees were resettled in the United States. Before fiscal year 2016, the number of refugees resettled in the United States under the Obama administration declined from 74,649 in fiscal year 2009 to 56,424 in fiscal year 2011. Then increased to 69,933 in fiscal year 2015. Breitbart News reported during the George W. Bush administration, the number of refugees admitted into the United States annually ranged from a low of 28,390 in fiscal year 2003 to a high of 60,191 in fiscal year 2008. Opponents of the federal refugee resettlement program vigorously criticized the report change in the Trump administration's refugee admissions policy for 2017. Stunning news. Trump State Department opens floodgates. Refugee admissions will explode in coming weeks. And Corcoran wrote at Refugee Resettlement Watch on Saturday. Betraying the voters who elected Donald Trump, the Department of State slipped the news to the contractors on Thursday, who then slipped the news to the New York Times just as you were packing up for the beach or getting ready for a family barbecue, using federal government's favorite holiday weekend trick to bury the news, Corcoran added. In contrast, the voluntary agencies, Vologs, who are paid by taxpayers more than $1 billion annually to resettle refugees under the program, praised the State Department's decision, but also wants more in fiscal year 2018. Refugee advocates were delighted by State Department's decision, the Times reported. This is long overdue, but we're very happy, said Mark Hetfield, President and Chief Executive of HIAS, an Immigrant Aid Society. But many of the advocates said they were worried that any reprieve would be temporary. The president's proposed budget cuts for 2018 would mean we would have a much smaller program next year, no matter what happens with his executive orders, said Errol Kekik, Executive Director of the Immigration and Refugee Program at Church World Service. The budget submitted to Congress by the Trump administration on Monday for fiscal year 2018 cuts refugee resettlement funding significantly in the State Department and the Department of Health and Human Services, the two departments with primary responsibility for the federal program's implementation and management, Breitbart News reported earlier this week. The U.S. Refugee Admissions Program category of the State Department's Migration and Refugee Assistance account, which is administered by the Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration, and funds overseas processing, transportation, and initial placement for refugees and certain other categories of special immigrants resettling in the United States, is cut by 11%, from $450 million in fiscal year 2017, which is estimated, to $390 million in fiscal year 2018. Similarly, the Refugee and Entrant Assistance account within the Department of Health and Human Services, which is administered by the Office of Refugee Resettlement and funds time-limited cash benefits and numerous non-cash federal benefits, including food assistance through SNAP, medical care, and education, is cut by 31%, from $695 million in fiscal year 2017, which is estimated, to $479 million in fiscal year that begins on October the 1st. Congress, however, may decide to restore these cuts in refugee resettlement funding. The Vologs are actively lobbying Congress to increase refugee resettlement funding in the fiscal 2018 budget to a level that will support the resettlement of at least 75,000 refugees during the year. The Daily Caller reported recently that the Trump administration budget for fiscal year 2018 would support the resettlement of 50,000 refugees a year. Population, refugees, and migration, the administrative part of the State Department that manages the inflow of refugees to the United States, continues to be run by holdovers from the Obama administration. My question would be, what happened to America First? He's handed over a boatload of money to the Saudis that aren't bringing in any refugees into their country. Put in the floodgates here when we have all kinds of problems in this country that need to be funded. What happened to America First? The next article is off of Liberty Headlines. It says U.S. plans first ever ICB missile intercept next Tuesday. It's off of Zero Hedge originally. It says less than a month after the U.S. Air Force successfully test-fired 2 Minuteman ICBM missiles from California's Vandenberg Air Force Base, which hit target approximately 4,200 miles away at, I'm going to pronounce this correctly, but it's Kwajalein Atoll in the Pacific Ocean. Today, Pentagon officials said that the U.S. will try to shoot down an intercontinental range missile for the first time in test in 2 weeks in preparation for North Korea's growing threat. According to AP, the stated goal to more closely simulate North Korean ICBM aimed at the United States homeland. The Pentagon's Missile Defense Agency on Tuesday will shoot an interceptor from the ground-based Mid-Course Defense System, a network meant to protect the country against a limited nuclear attack, at a custom-made missile meant to simulate an ICBM. As ABC adds, an interceptor is to be launched from an underground silo at Vandenberg Air Force Base in California and soar toward the target, which will be fired from a test range on, and again, I'm guessing at this, Kerguelen Atoll in the Pacific. If all goes as planned, the kill vehicle will slam into the ICBM-like target's mock warhead high over the Pacific Ocean. The target will be a custom-made missile meant to simulate an ICBM, meaning it will fly faster than missiles used in previous intercept tests. According to Christopher Johnson, spokesman for Missile Defense Agency, the target is not a mock-up of an actual North Korean ICBM, Johnson added. The basic defensive area is to fire a rocket into space upon warning of a hostile missile launch. The rocket releases a 5-foot-long device called a kill vehicle that uses internal guidance systems to steer into the path of the oncoming missile's warhead, destroying it by force of impact. Officially known as the ground-based mid-course defense system, the Pentagon likens it to hitting a bullet with a bullet. The Pentagon's Missile Defense Agency, which is responsible for developing and testing the system, has scheduled the intercept test for Tuesday. We conduct increasingly complex test scenarios as the program matures and advances, Johnson told AP on Friday. Testing against an ACBM-type threat is the next step in that process. The next article is off of telegraph.co.uk. It says, exclusive, Manchester suicide bomber used student loan and benefits to fund terror plots. See, I found this fascinating, considering that we're opening the floodgates to migrants into this country, or refugees, or I don't know, whatever you want to call them. And then we're going to hand out all kinds of money to them as well. Millions of dollars put into these funds for these refugees. And yet it comes out that this Manchester suicide bomber used taxpayer-funded student loans and benefits to bankroll the terror plot. Salman Abidi is understood to have received thousands of pounds in state funding in the run-up to Monday's atrocity, even while he was overseas receiving bomb-making training. Police are investigating Abidi's finances, including how he paid for frequent trips to Libya, where he's thought to have been taught to make bombs at a jihadist training camp. It comes as Assistant Commissioner Mark Rowley, Britain's most senior counterterrorism officer, said detectives had made immense progress in dismantling Abidi's terror network. In further developments, a barbershop in Manchester was raided with one theory that Abidi may have obtained hydrogen peroxide, a chemical used in the hairdressing industry, but which can also be used to construct bombs from the salon. Abidi's finances are a major theme of the police inquiry amid growing alarm over the ease with which jihadists are able to manipulate Britain's welfare and student loan system to secure financing. One former detective said jihadists were enrolling on university courses to control the student loans, often with no intention of turning up. Abidi was given £7,000 from taxpayer-funded student loan company after beginning a business administration degree at Salford University in October of 2015. It is thought he received a further £7,000 in the 2016 academic year, even though by then he had already dropped out of the course. Salford University declined to say if it had informed the student loans company that Abidi's funding should have been stopped. Separately, the Department for Work and Pensions refused to say if Abidi had received any benefits, including housing benefit and income support, worth up to £250 a week during the 2015 and 2016. It would only say he was not claiming benefits in the weeks before the attack. Abdi, age 22, never held down a job, according to neighbors and friends, but he was able to travel regularly between the UK and Libya. Abdi also had sufficient funds to buy materials for his sophisticated bomb while living in a rented house in South Manchester. 6 weeks before the bombing, Abdi rented a second property in a block of flats in Blackley, 8 miles from his home, paying £700 in cash. He had enough money to rent a third property in the center of Manchester, from where he set off with a backpack containing the bomb. Abdi also withdrew £250 in cash 3 days before the attack and transferred £2,500 to his younger brother Hashim in Libya, who was accused of knowing about the attack in advance. A student loans company spokesman said it would not be appropriate for the student loans company to respond to media requests for information that may be relevant to the ongoing police investigation. It is for universities to inform the student loans company when students withdraw or suspend their studies, at which point funding stops. A Salford University spokesman asked if it had told the SLC Abdi had dropped out, said, "We cannot comment." David Dissett, a former Metropolitan Police detective who worked on the 7/7 London bombing investigation, said of the student loan system, "It is an easy way for terrorists to move forward and finance their activities at the expense of the taxpayer. All you've got to do is get yourself into university and then off you go." Often they have no intention of turning up. I'm sure there's some typos in that, but that's how it reads. Professor Anthony Glees, director of Buckingham University's Center for Security and Intelligence Studies, said the British system makes funds readily available to jihadist students without checks on them. There needs to be an inquiry into this. The government has previously admitted it has no idea how many terrorists could be using taxpayer-funded benefits and student loans to finance their activities. 2 men were convicted at the end of 2016 of channeling thousands of pounds of fraudulent housing benefits into the Islamic fanatics behind the Paris and Brussels terrorist outrages. Mohammed Abrini, the Brussels terror suspect dubbed the Man in the Hat, received £3,000 in fraudulent housing benefit. In the early hours of Saturday, the police made fresh arrests in Manchester bombing probe after police carried out a controlled explosion during a raid on an address in the Cheetham Hill area in the city. 2 men aged 20 and 22 were held on suspicion of terror offenses. And I'd be interested to know where they're getting their funding. The next one here is off of Breitbart. It says, Border Patrol agents arrest more previously deported sex offenders. Border Patrol agents in the Rio Grande Valley sector captured 2 previously deported illegal alien sex offenders within a few hours on Tuesday. Agents assigned to Kingsville Station in South Texas apprehended a Mexican national with long criminal history that includes sexual assault with scissors. Convicted the criminal alien on charges of robbery with scissors and other felonies. The man attempted to hide from agents conducting train inspections at the Cerrita checkpoint, according to information provided to Breitbart, Texas, by supervisory Border Patrol agent Marlene Castro. According to the U.S. Customs and Border Protection website, the mission of agents at Kingsville Station going back to the 1940s has included performing freight train check operations at checkpoint operations on U.S. Highway 77, Kingsville, Texas, in Clayburgh County, which borders the Gulf of Mexico and is near 825,000-acre King Ranch, the largest in Texas. Agents assigned to Rio Grande City Station arrested a Salvadorian national near La Grula, Texas, a few hours after the Mexican national was arrested. La Grula is a city in Starr County located on the Texas-Mexico border. When the agents conducted a criminal background check, they discovered the illegal alien has a history, including conviction in 2012 for possession of obscure matter, minor in a sex act. Breitbart, Texas reported in early April that Border Patrol officials in Rio Grande Valley sector disclosed their agents' arrest more than 100 previously deported sex offenders between the fiscal year 2017, which began on October the 1st of 2016, and April the 1st. In all, Rio Grande Valley sector agents arrested 1,100 criminal aliens since the beginning of fiscal year 2017. These arrests were made by agents assigned to the McAllen and Falfurrias stations. Nearly 10% of those arrested were violent sex offenders. Falfurrias in Texas is located 70 miles north of the Rio Grande River on Highway 281. Agents posted at the Falfurrias station are responsible for patrolling 1,105 square miles in Brooks County and part of Jim Wells County. The McAllen station is responsible for patrolling 53 miles of the Rio Grande. Other Border Patrol sectors report they frequently arrest previously deported sex offenders. A few days ago, Breitbart, Texas reported that Border Patrol agents in the Tucson sector arrested 2 more previously deported sex offenders right after they crossed the border from Mexico. Criminal aliens pose a danger to women and children because of the possibility they might re-offend. The next article is off of rickwells.us, and it says, Clinton still above the law. Obama judge won't allow Benghazi lawsuit trial. Another federal so-called judge, an Obama appointee, has acted in a clearly partisan manner on behalf of Hillary Clinton and Hussein Obama, contorting and ignoring the law as needed and applying some creative writing skills in the crafting of her ruling. U.S. District Court Judge Amy Berman Jackson ruled Friday on the eve of a holiday weekend against Patricia Smith, the mother of State Department Information Officer Sean Smith, and Charles Woods, the father of CIA operative Tyrone Woods. Both men were killed when Hillary Clinton and Hussein Obama left them and their colleagues sitting ducks in Benghazi on 9/11 of 2012. The lawsuit alleged that Clinton's reckless and careless failure to allow protocols in protecting sensitive information contained in her emails led to the deaths of 2 Americans as part of the protection Clinton crime boss, a charge that she has essentially slandered the parents when she called them liars, was also thrown out. And looking for any excuse to shield Clinton from accountability, the wrongful death portion, Jackson utilized technical grounds, declaring that Clinton used her email in the course of her official duties. She refused to consider that she used a compromised email account that had been left open to foreign surveillance in the conduct of her sales of secrets and reckless handling of classified information. She still treated the unsecured emails as if they were secure in her flawed and corrupted decision. The Clinton Kangaroo Court finds she was acting in the scope of her employment. She wrote, the court finds that Secretary Clinton was acting in the scope of her employment when she transmitted the emails that are alleged to give rise to her liability. The untimely death of plaintiff's sons is tragic, and the court does not mean to minimize the unspeakable loss that plaintiffs have suffered in any way. But when one applies the appropriate legal standards, it is clear that plaintiffs have not alleged sufficient facts to rebut the presumption that Secretary Clinton was acting in her official capacity when she used her private email server. The plaintiffs would have demonstrated that rebuttal had Clinton judge allowed the case to go to trial. That's why she threw it out. Rather than acknowledging the crux of the issue, that Clinton's exploitive negligence had created the breach that led to the deaths. Jackson simply called everything off, pretending that the suit had never happened rather than allowing justice to run its course. She wrote, nothing about this decision should be construed as making any determination or expressing any opinion about the propriety of the use of the private email server or the context of accuracy of the statements made by the secretary to the family members or to anyone else in the days following the Benghazi attack. Again, all of that would have come out at trial, and that is the real reason she ruled the way she did. In documenting her refusal to consider the compromised by corruption email as anything other than the normal secure email, so-called Judge Jackson wrote, for the purpose of the lawsuit, it does not matter whether Secretary Clinton used private email server lawfully or unlawfully. Instead, the relevant inquiry is whether Secretary Clinton's electronic communication with State Department personnel about official business during her tenure were within the scope of her employment as head of the State Department, the judge said. Her actions, communicating with other State Department personnel and advisors about the official business of the department, fall squarely within the scope of her duty to run the department and conduct the foreign affairs of the nation as Secretary of State. Larry Klayman vowed to appeal the decision that is simply dishonest and an outrage. Jackson also gave Clinton a pass on the defamation claims, determining Clinton's public statements that the family members were wrong about what she had said to them. The claim the video fabrication was the cause of the attacks were not the equivalent of saying the parents lied. She concluded that Clinton was saying that the parents could be mistaken in their recollection, particularly given the impact of their children's deaths. Secretary Clinton did not refer to the plaintiffs as liars, Jackson said. Right, Judge, she just said they weren't telling the truth, patronizingly, dismissively, and condescendingly. The attorney for Mrs. Smith and Mr. Woods, Freedom Watch's Larry Klayman, vowed an appeal of the decision he decried as simply dishonest and an outrage. Klayman contends his client should have been given the opportunity to force Clinton into a deposition to question her on the legal server, and that a jury should have been allowed to make the decision as to whether Clinton's statements were defamatory. He said Jackson clearly put politics ahead of her oath of office as a judge to administer to the law in a neutral, unbiased way. He added Judge Jackson, who is an Obama appointee and a Democrat, was clearly protecting Mrs. Clinton, and this intellectually dishonest decision will be appealed. My clients are confident of success. The Clinton-Obama crime syndicate again demonstrates it is above and owns the law. The next article is off of Breitbart. It says, California farmer fined $2.8 million for plowing his own field. The California farmer who became the poster child for the EPA reform under President Donald Trump is being fined $2.8 million by state and federal regulators for plowing his own field in Teham County. The case is the first time that we're aware of that says you need to get a U.S. Army Corps of Engineers permit to plow and grow crops, said Anthony Francois, an attorney for the Pacific Legal Foundation. We're not going to produce much food under those kind of regulations, he said. However, U.S. District Judge Kimberly J. Mueller agreed with the Army Corps in a judgment issued in June of 2016, a penalty trial in which the U.S. Attorney Office asked for $2.8 million in civil penalties is set for August. It all started in 2012 when a Modesto farmer named John Duarte, owner of Duarte Nursery, bought 450 acres near Red Bluff in Tacoma County. Because the average had numerous swales and wetlands, Duarte made the decision to hire a consulting firm to map out areas on the property to mark off areas that drained into the nearby Coyote and Oak Creeks, which under an Obama-era regulation are considered to be waters of the United States, or WOTUS. According to record report, Francois and court records confirmed that Duarte planned to grow wheat on the 450 acres. The wheat Duarte planted was never harvested because in February of 2013, the Army Corps of Engineers and the California Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board issued orders to stop work at the site because Duarte had violated the Clean Water Act by not obtaining a permit to discharge dredged or filled material into seasonal wetlands considered waters of the United States. Duarte responded by suing the Army Corps and the state of California. The U.S. Attorney's Office filed a countersuit. The government's case appeared to rest entirely on technically created under the new rule that grants EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers sweeping powers in what President Trump, at the signing of an executive order directing EPA to begin repealing WOTUS, described as a massive power grab, granting the federal government control of nearly every puddle or every ditch on a farmer's land. The Los Angeles Times described the whole case as protracted legal battle ensues over whether 5-inch furrows amounted to enough of an alteration of the land to pollute the pools. The wetlands in my case amount were very minor depressions. They were vernal pools, far away and disconnected from any stream or navigable waters, Duarte told the Times. Sometimes they were just dark spots in the grass to the layperson. In an ironic twist, the Times noted that during the Senate hearing on Pruitt's nomination, Iowa Senator Joni Ernst used a photograph of Duarte's furrows as a backdrop, mocking a federal brief that said the furrows' tops now serve as small mountain ranges. Despite Trump's new policy, federal regulators are still demanding almost $3 million from an American farmer for plowing his own privately acquired farmland, land that he reasonably assumed to be exempt from the regulation now being enforced. Now, I know there's a lot of folks that aren't farmers that listen to this report. And you're thinking, oh, it's just a farmer. Nothing I can do about it. Doesn't affect me. Guess what? It does affect you. If they put the farmers out of business, where's your food going to come from? Foreign countries that don't have the kind of regulations that we have here in the United States. You don't know what the hell you'll be eating. See, it starts with things like Clive and Bundy. And if you're not familiar, if you're listening to this and you don't know who Clive and Bundy is, you better be looking it up. You better be doing your research. They're putting our ranchers and our farmers out of business with this foolishness. They're opening the floodgates for refugees to come into this country on our taxpayer dollars. We can't take care of our homeless. There aren't enough jobs to go around. I mean, you listen to the reports, oh, this company's going to have 1,000 jobs. This company's going to bring in 5,000 jobs. This company's going to do this. That company's going to do that. Gonna, shoulda, coulda, woulda. And in the meantime, you hear all these reports of all these retail stores closing down. The malls are becoming dark because the stores are closing down. There are people that work in those stores that don't have jobs. All these things that, oh, this company's coming to the United States. They're going to open jobs. This company's bringing back jobs. This company's going to do this. Gonna. That's the key word there, gonna. None of that stuff's happened. And in the meantime, they're shutting down your food supply. They're opening up to the refugees. They're bringing people in here that's going to work far less than minimum wage. So where do you think your money's going to come from when you lose your job? And you can't even grow a garden in your backyard because you got the EPA up your rear end saying that you can't water it. You better be opening your eyes because this is the kind of stuff that's going on. The next article is off BizPac Review. Federal prosecutor investigating visa fraud cases found dead on beach in Wasserman Schultz district. Actually, this and the next article is about this. Federal prosecutor from U.S. Attorney's Office in Miami, who happened to be investigating voter fraud, has been found dead along a Hollywood, Florida beach, and is being investigated as a homicide. According to Hollywood spokeswoman Miranda Grossman, although the investigation is still very preliminary, 37-year-old Brenda J. Wisenot Jr. likely suffered a head wound from a gunshot or other direct trauma. His body was found by a passerby washed up on the Hollywood beach shore south of Magnolia Terrace. It isn't clear whether the victim or where the victim actually died. For now, the FBI Miami office is referring all questions related to Wisenot's death to Hollywood police, but the death is found to be retaliatory or related to a case Wisenot was working on. Standard procedure would mean the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office aggressively working together on the case. News spread quickly on social media that Wisenot was involved in a recent fraud probe involving the DNC, though none of the news reports mentioned that as fact. A graduate of the University of Florida Law School, Wisenot has been a member of the Florida Bar since 2004, joining the U.S. Attorney's Office in January of 2017 in the Major Crimes section. His office happens to be in Congressman Debbie Wasserman Schultz district. According to the AP, Wisenot has been handling several visa and passport fraud cases. The U.S. Attorney Office family was deeply saddened and shocked to learn of Baraton's death. Acting U.S. Attorney Benjamin Greenberg said in a statement, "He was a great lawyer and a wonderful colleague, and we will miss him deeply. Our thoughts are with Baraton's family and friends." Father of three, Wisenot and his wife Ebony lived in Miramar. The final article is off of Western Journalism, and it says federal prosecutor found dead along the beach. Federal prosecutor who worked at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Miami has been identified as the man found dead along Hollywood Beach this week in a case being investigated as a crime. Hollywood police confirmed that the deceased man is Baraton J. Wisenot Jr., age 37, of Miramar. A police spokeswoman said he may have suffered a head wound caused by a possible gunshot or other type of trauma. The investigation is still very preliminary, Hollywood Police Department spokesman Miranda Grossman said, adding that detectives and the Ballard medical examiner are still looking at it. The FBI's Miami office said it was aware of Wisenot's death, but referred questions to the Hollywood police. Normally, if the death of a federal prosecutor or agent were retaliatory in nature or related to a criminal case, both the FBI and the Attorney's Office, or U.S. Attorney's Office, would be sounding the alarm and pursuing an aggressive investigation. Wisenot, who was admitted to the Florida Bar in 2004 after graduating from University of Florida Law School, joined the U.S. Attorney's Office earlier this year and worked in the Major Crimes section. The office, which prosecutes criminal and civil cases from Key West to Fort Pierce, issued a statement Thursday. The U.S. Attorney's Office family was deeply saddened and shocked to learn of Brenton's death, said acting U.S. Attorney Benjamin Greenberg. He was a great lawyer and wonderful colleague, and we will miss him deeply. Our thoughts are with Brenton's family and friends. An email about Wisenot's death was circulated among prosecutors and other employers or other employees, but did not comment about the circumstances or causes. Colleagues expressed shock over his death. A friend who knew Wisenot, Miami lawyer Michael Feeler, said he was the epitome of gentleman and possessed an exceptional legal mind. Feeler said he had worked for the Miami law firm Foley and Mansfield before joining the U.S. Attorney's Office. He was very motivated by public service, Feeler said. He volunteered for the Florida Bar and planned to become a judge. Wisenant lived in Miramar with his wife Ebony, a physician who teaches at Florida International University's College of Medicine. They are parents of 3 children. It's unclear whether or where Wisenant actually died. His body was found washed up on the shore just south of Magnolia Terrace on Hollywood Beach early Wednesday by a passerby. All I can confirm is that it's him, Grossman said. So that's all I have for you this morning. If you like what I'm doing, give it a thumbs up, share it on your social media, and don't forget to subscribe. That way you'll stay informed. Have a great day.